Before I share my heartbreaking story, my dears, I want to know who is listening to an old woman's tale. Where are you watching from? Which state? Which country? Let me know in the comments below. And how old are you? What are your names, my sweethearts? I will read every single one. Please pull up a chair. And if you want to hear my story, press that follow button. Now, let me tell you what happened to me. They say when you pass on, the world gets real quiet. But it don't, not really. You just start to hear the things you were too busy living to notice. You hear the wind scratching at the old window pane, like a dog wanting to come inside. You hear the floorboards groaning under the weight of old memories. And you hear the heavy breaking hearts of the people you left behind. My name is Nellie Mae. I lived 72 years on this earth, right here in Bentry Grove, Kentucky. It is a place where the hills roll long and dark. The soil demands everything you have got, just to give you a little bit back. I spent my whole life working this land. My hands were always rough. They were the hands of a woman who buried a husband too early. I raised a son who forgot where he came from, and I took in 2 little boys who had nowhere else to go. My son Earl, he was a rolling stone. He left Bentry Grove when the boys were just toddlers. He said the dirt here was a prison. Their mother, Loretta, she was not built for the quiet country life either. She drifted away like smoke on a windy morning. She left nothing behind but 2 hungry mouths and a suitcase full of broken promises. So I took them in, Tommy and Billy. They were my flesh and blood. I fed them from my garden. I patched the knees of their jeans. I prayed over their fevers in the dead of winter. I thought love could heal the holes their parents left in them. Oh, how I was wrong. You see, I am speaking to you now from the cold, quiet woods beyond the creek, because those 2 boys, the ones I rocked to sleep right here on this porch, they took my life. They stole my breath, and all for a tin box hidden beneath the floorboards. Life on a remote farm does not give you room to be soft. If you do not chop the wood, you freeze. If you do not tend the garden, you starve. For 40 years, I did it all. And as my bones started to ache and my back started to bend, I needed the boys to step up. Billy tried. He really did. He was 20 years old, but he still had the eyes of that little boy who was scared of the thunder. He would help me carry the water pails, even if his mind was always wandering off somewhere far away. He was weak-willed, but he had a sweetness in him. But Tommy was 22, and he was different. He had Earl's restless blood, but none of Earl's charm. Tommy hated the dirt. He hated the chores. He would sit on the porch for hours, just staring at the horizon. He smoked his cigarettes and cursed the town. He felt like the world owed him something just for being born. He would spit on the ground and say there was nothing here for them but dirt and dying. I would tell him that honest work builds a soul. But Tommy did not want a soul. He wanted a way out. We did not have much, or so they thought. But a woman who lived through the hard times learns never to trust a bank. Every dollar I ever made from selling eggs, every spare cent from quilting, every piece of script my late husband left me, I saved it. I kept it in an old green metal cash box. It was tucked away deep under the floorboards in my bedroom, right beneath the heavy oak wardrobe. It was my safety net. It was meant for them, truly. For when I passed on, naturally, it was supposed to buy them a tractor or help them build a home of their own. It was nearly $12,000. To a city person, maybe that ain't a fortune. But to a boy in Bentry Grove who hated the dirt, it looked like a mountain of gold. It happened on a rainy Tuesday in October. I had gone to town with a neighbor to get my medicine. Tommy was supposed to be fixing the leak in my bedroom ceiling. He must have stepped too hard or noticed the wardrobe had been shifted. When I came back, the wardrobe was straight. But Tommy was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at me. His eyes, oh, the Lord help me. I will never forget his eyes that afternoon. They were not the eyes of my grandson anymore. They were cold, calculating, like a wolf looking through a fence at a lamb. He did not say a word. He just watched me take off my coat with those heavy, unblinking eyes. The next 2 weeks, the air in that house turned thick. You could cut the tension with a butchering knife. Every night after I crawled into my bed and turned down the kerosene lamp, I would hear them. The walls in that old farmhouse are thin, like old parchment. Tommy and Billy shared the small room across the hall. Whisper, whisper, whisper. It sounded like dry leaves scraping against the foundation. At first I thought they were just daydreaming about girls or cars or moving away to the city, but then I started catching snatches of their talk. Tommy's voice would drift through the cracks, telling Billy they could be in California in 3 days. No more mud. No more old woman telling them to haul wood. Just freedom. Billy would whisper back, his voice trembling like a wet dog. He would say it was my money and that I needed it. He would ask what would happen to me. But Tommy would snap at him. He would say I was old, that I had lived my life, and that I was just holding them back. He asked Billy if he wanted to rot here and die in these hills. I lay there in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I did not want to believe it. A grandmother's heart is blind, you see. It creates excuses where there are none. I told myself Tommy was just talking big. Boys do that. They grumble. They dream. They do not hurt the hand that feeds them. But the dread, oh, the dread settled deep into my bones. It was a cold weight in the pit of my stomach. A few days later, I noticed the tools had been moved in the barn. The shovel was missing from its hook. When I asked Billy about it, he could not look me in the eye. He just stared at his boots, shuffling his feet. He mumbled that he must have misplaced it. He looked so pale, like he had seen a ghost. Little did he know he was looking at one in the making. That night the weather turned foul. A fierce autumn storm rolled over the mountains. It brought a howling wind and a rain that beat against the tin roof like 1,000 small fists. It felt like the world itself was crying out a warning. It was past midnight when the door to my bedroom creaked open. I was not asleep. The storm had kept me awake, or maybe it was the angel of death tapping on my shoulder. I saw the door widen, a sliver of darkness opening up in the dark. 2 shapes stepped into the room. I called out their names. I asked if the roof was leaking again. There was no answer, only the sound of heavy breathing. Tommy moved first. He did not hesitate. He did not say he was sorry. He did not look at the photos of him as a baby sitting on my nightstand. He just lunged forward. The first blow caught me across the temple. It did not feel like pain at first. It just felt like a great, blinding flash of white light. It was followed by a sound like a cracked bell ringing right inside my skull. I fell back against the pillows, my vision swimming. Through the blur, I saw Billy standing at the foot of my bed. He had his hands over his mouth, tears streaming down his face. Billy screamed for Tommy to stop. He said I was bleeding. but his voice was weak. It was the voice of a coward who wanted the prize but could not bear the cost. Tommy just hissed at him to shut up and grab my legs. His voice was monstrous, cold, dead. I tried to raise my hand. I wanted to touch Tommy's face. I wanted to ask him why. What did I do wrong? Did I not love you enough? Did I not give you everything I had? But the second blow came, and then the third. The pain finally found me then. It was a searing hot iron pouring into my head. But the pain in my body was nothing compared to the tearing of my heart. To know that the blood of your blood is pouring your life out onto the sheets, that is a darkness no graveyard can match. They wrapped me in my own handmade quilt. It was the one with the blue and yellow patches I had sewn together during the long winter nights while they watched television in the next room. I was fading, slipping away into the deep black, but my spirit would not let go just yet. I felt them lift me. I felt the cold rain hit my face as they carried me out to the bed of the old Ford pickup truck. The truck jolted and bumped down the old logging trail. We went deep into the black heart of the woods, miles away from the farmhouse. Billy was sobbing the whole way, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. Tommy just sat there, clutching my green metal cash box on his lap. He wiped my blood off the lid with his sleeve. They stopped near the old abandoned stone quarry. It was a place where nobody ever goes. They dragged me out of the truck. They threw me into the shallow trench they had dug the day before. The mud was cold. It clung to my nightgown like wet wool. Tommy started shoveling the dirt over me. Each thud of earth against my chest felt like a door closing forever. But just before the darkness took my eyes completely, just before my soul broke free from this broken, battered shell, the clouds parted for a brief second. The moon shone down through the branches, and I saw something. I saw something lying in the mud right at the edge of the grave. It was something Tommy had dropped from his pocket when he was lifting me. It was something he did not notice in the dark and the rain. It was an object that did not belong in those woods. It is something that will change everything when the light of day finally comes. But I could not cry out to tell him. The dirt covered my face, and Nellie Mae was gone. The next morning the storm passed. The sun came up over Bentry Grove, bright and mocking. My son Earl came home. He had a bad feeling, he said later. He had tried to call, and when the line was dead, he drove through the night. He found the house empty. The floorboards were pulled up in my room, and the sheets were gone. Right now, as I speak to you, the state troopers are walking through my kitchen. They are looking at the empty space under the wardrobe. They are questioning Billy, who is shaking so hard he can barely hold his coffee cup. Tommy is standing by the window, his face like stone. He is telling them I must have gone for a walk in the storm and gotten lost. They think they buried me deep enough. They think the secret is safe in the dark woods. But the earth does not keep secrets for long. Not when the blood cries out from the ground. What did Tommy drop in the mud? And what will the police find when they start digging? Tommy had a silver lighter. It was a heavy thing, engraved with his grandfather's initials. He carried it everywhere. He cherished it more than he ever cherished me. When he was pulling my body into that shallow grave, the lighter slipped from his pocket. It fell right into the wet, black mud next to my face. He did not notice. He was too busy wiping my blood off that green metal cash box. He was too busy listening to the rain. But I saw it. The moonlight caught the silver edge of it just before the dirt covered my eyes. A piece of them stayed with me in the ground. A piece of the killer stayed with the killed. When the last shovel of dirt fell, the boys did not linger. They did not say a prayer. They threw the tools into the back of the old Ford pickup and drove away. They left me in the deep heart of the woods, near the old stone quarry where the wind always howls. They drove back to the farmhouse in silence. The rain washed the mud off the tires, but it could not wash the stain off their souls. Tommy went straight to his room. He hid my cash box under his own mattress. He did not even look at the empty space under my wardrobe where it used to live. He just sat on his bed and counted the money. $12,000. He counted every single bill, smoothing out the crumpled ones with his cold fingers. Billy did not go to his room. He sat on the kitchen floor, right where the linoleum was worn down from my footsteps. He rocked back and forth, holding his knees to his chest. He was crying, but he had to do it quietly so Tommy would not hear him. Every time the house creaked, Billy jumped. He thought it was me. He thought his grandmother was coming back through the front door to fix him a plate of biscuits. By dawn, they were acting like nothing had happened. Tommy made a pot of black coffee. He sat at the table, smoking a different cigarette, looking out at the foggy fields. He told Billy to wash his face. He told him to put on a clean shirt. He told him that if he opened his mouth, he would end up in the woods next to me. Around 8 o'clock in the morning, the gravel in the driveway crunched. It was Earl, my son, their father. He had driven through the night from Ohio. He said he had a sudden, terrible ache in his chest. A mother and a son have a bond, you see. Even when they are apart, the strings of the heart still pull. He knew something was wrong. Earl walked through the back door carrying his duffel bag. The first thing he noticed was the smell. The house smelled like damp earth and bleach. Tommy had tried to scrub the bedroom floor, but you cannot scrub away the scent of death. Earl looked at the boys. He asked where I was. He said my rocking chair was empty and the wood stove was cold. Tommy did not blink. He looked his father right in the eye. He said I had gone out into the storm the night before. He said I was looking for a lost calf down by the creek, and I had not come back. He said they had looked for me until their flashlights died. Billy could not look at his father. He stood by the sink, his back turned, scrubbing a clean plate over and over until his knuckles turned white. Earl believed them. He trusted his boys. He sat down at the table and buried his face in his hands. He started to cry, wondering how his old mother could wander off into a storm like that. My heart broke all over again, watching my son weep for a lie. By noon, the remote farmhouse was full of people. Earl had called the sheriff, and the news traveled fast through Bentry Grove. Neighbors I had known for 40 years came down the road in their trucks. They brought flashlights. They brought heavy coats. They brought their hunting dogs. The search party lined up at the edge of the woods. I watched them from the spirit world. I was a mist in the trees. I was a sigh in the wind. I wanted to scream to them. I wanted to tell them to look at the mud on Tommy's boots. I wanted to tell them to look under the mattress in the boys' room. But the dead have no voice. We can only watch and wait for the truth to find its own way out. The sheriff set up a base in my kitchen. He sat in my chair. He spread his maps across my table. He asked Tommy and Billy to tell the story again. Tommy was a master at the lie. He spoke with a sad, quiet voice. He pointed toward the southern creek, away from where they had actually taken me. He told the searchers to check the deep ravines down by the water. He acted like a grieving grandson, holding his father's shoulder, telling Earl that they would find me. He played the part so well it made my spirit shudder. But Billy, oh, Billy was a terrible liar. He sat in the corner of the living room, sweating despite the autumn chill. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. Every time the kitchen door opened, he flinched. When one of the neighbors offered him a cup of coffee, his hand shook so badly the liquid spilled onto his jeans. The sheriff noticed. He walked over to Billy and put a heavy hand on his shoulder. He asked him if he was doing all right. He asked if there was anything else he remembered about the night his grandmother went missing. Before Billy could speak, Tommy stepped between them. Tommy smiled a tight, cold smile. He told the sheriff that Billy was just fragile. He said Billy had always been a mama's boy, and seeing me disappear had broken his spirit. The sheriff nodded and walked away, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The dogs went into the woods. They sniffed around the creek, just like Tommy told them to. They found nothing. The rain had washed away any tracks, and the southern woods were clean. Tommy thought he had won. He thought the rain had covered his sins forever, but the real storm was happening inside that farmhouse. As the days went on, the walls began to close in on the boys. A week passed, and the search party grew smaller. People had to go back to their own farms. They began to whisper that the old woman must have fallen into the river and been carried away. They started talking about a memorial service. But inside the house, Billy was losing his mind. He could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the iron skillet rising and falling. He heard the sound of my skull cracking. He told Tommy that he could hear me walking in the hallway at night. He said he could hear my slippers dragging across the floorboards. Tommy told him to shut up. He called him weak. He called him a coward. He would grab Billy by the collar and slam him against the wall, shaking him until Billy choked. Tommy told him that they were in this together now. He said if Billy went down, they both went down. One night, Earl was sitting at the kitchen table alone. He was drinking whiskey out of an old jelly jar, staring at a photograph of me when I was a young woman. The house was quiet. Tommy had gone to town to buy cigarettes and gas. Billy came out of his room. He looked like a skeleton. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his skin was the color of old milk. He sat down across from his father. Earl looked up. He asked Billy what was eating at him. He said Billy looked like he was carrying the weight of the world. Billy started to tremble. He opened his mouth. A sob caught in his throat. He told Earl that he was sorry. He said he was so sorry. He said things had gotten out of hand, and they never meant for it to go that far. Earl frowned. He put his glass down. He asked Billy what he meant. He asked if something had happened to me before I walked out into the storm. Billy was right on the edge of the truth. The words were right there on his tongue. He was about to tell his father that his own sons had slaughtered his mother. But right then, the front door swung open. Tommy stepped into the house. He took one look at Billy's face, and he knew. He knew the boy was about to break. Tommy did not say anything to Earl. He just walked over, grabbed Billy by the arm, and hauled him out of the chair. He told Earl that Billy needed to rest. He carried him into the bedroom and locked the door behind them. That night there were no whispers. There were only muffled thuds and the sound of Billy weeping into his pillow. Tommy knew their time in Bentry Grove was up. The cracks were too wide. The house could no longer hold their secret. Before the sun came up the next morning, Tommy made his move. He did not wait for Earl to wake up. He went under his mattress and pulled out the green cash box. He packed a single duffel bag for himself and one for Billy. He woke Billy up by throwing a cold, wet rag in his face. He told him they were leaving. He said they were going to California, just like they planned. He told Billy that if he did not get into the truck, he would leave him behind to take the blame for the murder all by himself. Billy was too weak to fight. He was like a lamb being led to the slaughterhouse. He followed Tommy out to the pickup truck in the dark. They left a note on the kitchen table for Earl. It said they could not handle the grief of losing me, and they were going to find work out west. They abandoned their father in that empty, haunted house. The journey across the country was not the grand adventure Tommy had dreamed about. It was a long, miserable descent into hell. They drove through the night, crossing state lines, avoiding the main highways. Tommy kept his foot heavy on the gas. He kept looking in his rearview mirror, expecting to see the flashing blue lights of the police. Every time a car trailed behind them for too long, Tommy's knuckles would turn white on the steering wheel. They did not stay in nice hotels. Tommy was too paranoid for that. They stayed in cheap, run-down motels on the edge of forgotten desert towns, the kind of places where the neon signs flicker and the blankets smell like stale smoke. Tommy kept the cash box close. He would not let Billy touch it. He would not even let Billy look at it. But the money was disappearing faster than Tommy thought it would. Gas, food, cheap rooms, cigarettes, it all added up. The $12,000 that looked like a mountain in Kentucky looked like a molehill in the vastness of the West, and the guilt followed them. It was a third passenger in the cab of that truck. It sat right between them, cold and heavy. Billy was deteriorating. He stopped eating. He lived on black coffee and fear. He would sit in the passenger seat, staring out at the flat cornfields of Kansas, then the dry plains of Colorado, then the red rocks of Utah. But he did not see the scenery. He only saw my face. He told Tommy that he could see me sitting in the bed of the truck, wrapped in that blue and yellow quilt, getting soaked by the rain. Tommy would hit him. He would punch Billy in the shoulder or backhand him across the face while he was driving. He told him to stop talking about me. He told him that I was dead, that I was dirt, and that dead things do not talk. But I was talking. I was whispering to Billy's conscience. I was the small, quiet voice in his ear that he could not quiet down. I did not want revenge, my sweethearts. A grandmother does not want revenge. She wants the truth. She wants her children to be right with the Lord before it is too late. They finally reached California. They ended up in a dusty, sun-bleached town in the Central Valley. It was a place of endless orchards and blistering heat. It was nothing like the cool green hills of Kentucky. The sun was hot and cruel, baking the earth until it cracked. They rented a small, one-room trailer in a park behind a truck stop. The air conditioning did not work, and the metal walls turned the place into an oven. Tommy tried to find a job, but he had no skills and no references. He was just a boy from the hills with a dark secret. He started spending the stolen money on liquor, trying to drown out the silence. Billy did not leave the trailer. He lay on the narrow mattress, staring at the ceiling. The heat made him feverish. In his delirium, he completely lost track of time. He did not know if it was day or night. He only knew that the weight in his chest was crushing him. He could not breathe. One evening, Tommy came back to the trailer. He was drunk on cheap whiskey. He threw an empty wallet onto the table. The money was gone. The $12,000 was completely spent. The blood money had vanished like water into the sand. Tommy glared at Billy. He blamed him. He said if Billy had not been so useless, if he had helped him find work, they would be rich. He raised his hand to strike his brother again. But something shifted in Billy. The weakness finally broke, and something else took its place. It was not strength, really. It was just the total surrender of a broken spirit. He looked at Tommy, and he did not feel fear anymore. He just felt disgust. Billy stood up from the bed. He walked right past Tommy, out the door of the trailer and into the cool desert night. Tommy shouted after him, telling him to get back inside, but Billy did not stop. He walked down the dusty road, past the flashing lights of the truck stop, straight toward the main highway. He walked for 2 miles until he reached the town's small police station. It was a flat concrete building with a single blue light over the door. Billy walked inside. He was covered in sweat. His clothes were torn, and his eyes were hollow. He walked up to the desk sergeant, a tired-looking man who was typing on a computer. Billy did not hesitate. He did not try to save himself. He put his hands on the counter and looked the officer in the eye. He said his name was Nellie Mae. He said he came from Bentry Grove, Kentucky. And then, in a quiet, trembling voice, he said he needed to report a murder. The sergeant stopped typing. He looked at Billy, seeing the desperation in the boy's eyes. He called for a detective. They took Billy into a small room with a metal table and 2 chairs. They turned on a tape recorder, and Billy opened his heart. He poured out every single detail. He told them about the green cash box. He told them about Tommy's plan. He told them about the iron skillet. He told them how I looked at them, how I tried to touch Tommy's face, and how they wrapped me in my own quilt. He sobbed so hard he choked on his own tears. He told them exactly where they had buried me. He described the old stone quarry. He described the logging trail. And then he remembered the silver lighter. He told the detective that Tommy had lost his grandfather's lighter in the mud by the grave. The detective immediately called the state troopers back in Kentucky. Within an hour, the police cars were speeding down the logging trail toward the stone quarry. They had shovels. They had floodlights. They had a map drawn from Billy's confession. It did not take them long to find the spot. The earth was still loose. The rain had packed the mud, but the shape of the trench was still visible beneath the dead leaves. They began to dig. I watched them from the trees. I saw my son, Earl, standing at the edge of the police line, held back by 2 officers. He was screaming. He was begging the Lord that it wasn't true. He was praying that his boys hadn't done this to his mother. The shovels hit the blue and yellow quilt. A silence fell over the woods. Even the wind stopped blowing. They gently lifted my body from the earth. As they did, the sheriff shone his flashlight into the bottom of the trench. There, gleaming in the white light, half buried in the black mud, was the silver lighter. It had the initials of my late husband carved into the side, the final piece of evidence, the proof that Billy's story was true. When Tommy saw the police cars pulling into the trailer park in California, he did not surrender. He was a coward to the very end. He broke the back window of the trailer and crawled out into the desert brush. He ran into the dark, leaving everything behind. He became a fugitive, a ghost wandering the highways. But you cannot run from the law, and you certainly cannot run from the dead. They caught him 3 weeks later in Arizona. He was sleeping under a bridge, begging for scraps of food, looking like a wild animal. He had no money, no shoes, and no pride left. When they put the handcuffs on his wrists, he did not fight. He just looked at the ground, his face cold and empty. The trial was short. Billy pleaded guilty to his part in the crime. Because he confessed and led them to my body, the judge spared his life. He was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. He spends his days now in a small gray concrete cell. He told his lawyer that he prefers the cell to the trailer. He said the cell is quiet, and he doesn't see me in the corners anymore. He has accepted his punishment. He has found a strange kind of peace in his cage. Tommy received the death penalty. He sits on death row in a high-security prison, waiting for his time to come. Nobody visits him. Earl refused to see him. Loretta never showed up. He is completely alone in the dark, just like he left me in those woods. He wanted a way out of Bentry Grove, and he found it. But his path led him straight to a graveyard of his own making. My son Earl moved away from the farmhouse. He could not stand to live in a place where such evil had taken root. He sold the land to a timber company. The old house was torn down, and the fields have grown over with briars and weeds. The forest is reclaiming the place where I spent my 72 years. But I am not angry, my sweethearts. The sorrow is there, yes. It will always be there. A grandmother's heart does not stop loving just because it stopped beating. I still remember the little boys who used to hold my hands when we walked down to the creek. I choose to remember them that way, before the greed took them over. Love is a fragile thing. It must be tended to, just like the garden. If you neglect it, if you let the weeds of selfishness and greed grow, it will turn into a wilderness of thorns. I want to thank you for listening to an old woman's tale today. Thank you for pulling up a chair and sitting with me in the quiet. It means a lot to a spirit who has been lonely for so long. Take care of each other, my sweethearts. Hold your grandmothers close. Tell your families that you love them, because you never know when the storm will come, and you never know when the dark will take you away. Goodbye, my dears. May the Lord bless you and keep you safe from the shadows. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Goodbye.